Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. It's great to be here and great to be talking about climate solutions in emerging markets with our fantastic speakers. But just to set a bit of context for this panel, in order to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees, it's critical that we're catalyzing investment in climate solutions across emerging markets. Today, climate technology companies are still finding it very difficult to obtain funding in these regions, specifically within venture capital. And so the question we're hoping to ask is, how can we succeed in financing more climate innovation? Which policies should decision makers pursue at a national and international level? And what role can innovative financing solutions and coalitions play in kind of catalyzing this investment? So the goal of this session is to really talk through those key pieces of strategy and understand what instruments we need to actually scale up those solutions. This session is going to be the kickoff for the Forum on Climate Tech Investment, where we'll get into more of a discussion on the ways that we're doing this. That will be led by Ingrid-Gabriela Hoven from Gueye. So today I'm going to be joined by a couple of speakers who will help kind of flesh out really what this looks like from across the transition finance and climate finance spectrum. Mafalda Duarte from Green Climate Fund, she's the executive director there. Ambroise Fayolle, who is the vice president of the European Investment Bank. Rogelio de Santos from Dalus Capital, and we have someone from Climate Ventures who's also joining us from Brazil. So I will go ahead and call up our speakers now to join the panel. So thanks so much for being here. Maybe Bruna, starting with you, would love to just kind of hear the reality of on the ground. Obviously, Climate Ventures is working in Brazil. You're supporting a bunch of early stage innovators. So would love to hear kind of what that looks like. What are some of the critical needs that you see kind of working so closely with some of these early stage innovators and climate solutions?
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here and joining you for this panel. I'm Bruna Zampolo from Climate Ventures, and also it's an honor to be here representing this amazing team. I lead the partnership area at the organization, and for over 7 years, we have been orchestrating this ecosystem, this climate ecosystem in Brazil, connecting different actors, solution seekers, solution providers, and dynamizers to launch this innovative solutions. And so about this point that you brought, like, I understand there's a few issues, a few challenges for us to deal with, and one of those is about the collaboration on the ecosystem. So one major thing that we do on Climate Ventures as a backbone organization, as an orchestrator, is to develop labs and initiatives to connect those different stakeholders. And bringing an example for it, like we are now launching a Nature Investment Lab, which is focused on accelerating the finance and development on nature-based solutions in Brazil, which is essential for decarbonization this economy and to achieve this net zero targets. So bringing a deep dive into this project. So NBS projects face the significant challenges, and as they typically require high upfront capital and offer long-term long-term returns through ecosystem services and carbon credits, often spanning 30 or 40 years, and this makes it difficult to attract those conventional ventures capital, which generally operate in a shorter time. So we are addressing those challenges doing three different task forces, which are Policy and Regulation Task Force, the first one, which identifies a regulatory and a legal barrier to NBS investments and works to propose changes that encourage more capital to flow into the sector. The second one is Innovative Pilot Transaction Task Force, which maps these existing financial instruments and addresses those gaps and promotes innovative financial solutions. And the third one is the project of harmonization and develops that standardized business models, financial contracts, and impact assessments to streamline those NBS projects.
Thank you. Thank you. And so you mentioned, obviously, catalyzing nature-based solutions, a ton of upfront capital involved in that. Mafalda, would love to go to you and kind of hear a little bit more about how Green Climate Fund is really kind of working to build those multilateral partnerships and making sure that these early stage projects or growing, scaling projects get the funding that they need.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting us to be here. It was not deliberate that we gender segregated ourselves. So I actually feel bad. I should tell Ambroise, let's swap. So a couple of things which I think it's important to realize is that we need to do, and I'm going to simplify, of course, two things. When we talk about climate innovation, there's actually technologies that are already commercial, and we need to have them further deployed in emerging markets and developing countries. And then we have the early stage technologies. So here I think we are a little bit more focused on the early stage. So just to be clear about that. And to me, I think it's important for us to realize, because even just an example as the IEA, in their sustainable development scenario, they have a very interesting estimate that by 2035, an estimated 45% of GHG emissions will need to be accomplished by technologies that are currently in early adoption or demonstration phase. So of course, we have to accelerate quite a lot technologies that are already commercial and get them, penetrated in the markets where they are not penetrated. But we have to be mindful that if we are going to close the gap, the GHG emission gap, we need these early stage technologies. And another interesting thing to me is when we think about the COVID-19 pandemic, how quick we reacted to it and developed new technology, which is a new vaccine, by bringing actually the public and the private to work together. So I think, that's also a good example for us of how much we can do when we put ourselves to it, and the governments really work very hand in hand with private sector to get things done. However, the other interesting data point is that the majority of the climate finance that is deployed by the private sector is actually going towards later stage technologies. So again, we need to do something to revert this. So now coming back to your question on GCF and what GCF is doing, and a good example, and this is also why we are here today, working very closely with GIZ. So in ecosystem building to fostering this climate technology innovation. So we are working, supporting GIZ with something that is called Catalyst project. And we have work going on in West Africa and Latin America, which basically incubates and accelerates high technology, climate technology ventures. So what is it doing? And Ingrid here may be able to speak more about it later. It's basically providing services to develop the business model of these technology solutions and connecting to the markets. But again, this important connection between public and private So these accelerators and incubators that we are supporting basically are linking these public and private entities. So universities, technology schools that are partnering with the market players. The other thing that, another example of what we are doing is working around the regulatory environments, because I think this is work that needs to happen as well, is how do we support countries get in place the regulatory environment that will support these climate innovations. So again, we had a recently approved project, which is called Technopreneurship, that actually uses GCF's technical assistance grants to improve legal frameworks in some Southeast Asian countries. So there are many things that need to happen. We need to work at the regulatory level. We need to work at, investing directly or through funds, venture funds. We need to support the ecosystem, including accelerators and incubators. But again, I go back to my earlier point, which is the point I started with. We need to do more in this space, because again, it's going to be a big chunk of what we need to really attain 1.5 is these early stage technologies. And by the way, having supported some of these initiatives to try to find out, to do market discovery from developing countries in terms of, what are the innovative solutions out there. One of the things that has been really interesting to me is to see that the young, if we really target this area, we will be supporting a lot of young entrepreneurs. And this is another really strong reason to really invest in early stage and actually make available appropriate support to the ecosystem and appropriate venture capital.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you made a ton of fantastic points there, one being sort of this push and pull between how much we need to do right now in order to combat climate change, but also, doing that in financial markets that are volatile. And so, Ambroise, from your perspective, when you think about that volatility, I'm going to ask a question that hopefully we all know the answer to in this room, but is this a good time now to be investing in climate solutions? And maybe beyond that, how does EIB kind of use a mixed bag of financial structures to support innovation in the way that makes most sense?
Good morning. Many thanks to Ingrid, to Gateshead for the invitation. This is a great event. Actually, I'm very much on the same line as Mafalda. What we need to do if we want, Europe wants to be the first continent to be climate neutral by 2050, and this is a global objective of the world to reach this Paris Agreement targets. We need to speed up investments in what we know works, and we need to invest in clean tech technologies. We know that, as Mafalda said, if we want to reach the targets, there are already technologies that are not developed enough to produce what is needed. Now, when I thought of your question, actually, I thought of what happened in the Climate Week in New York 2 weeks ago. And actually, what I found interesting, especially in good part US audience, was that the question that they asked was not that one. The question they asked was, have we reached the tipping point when it's going to be more profitable to invest in green assets than in fossil fuel ones? And I think this is a question that is going to impact a lot what we are going to see in the next years. You are indeed at a tipping point when the more you look at fossil fuel investment, the more you see stranded assets. And the more you look at green assets, the more you see a combination of pricing that is actually much lower for solar panels, for example, and an interest that is growing. So that makes me optimistic. And this is what you see in multilateral development banks. EIB is one of the multilateral development banks, publish every year a climate finance report. The figure that they have for their finance of climate projects. This year, in 23, this year is a record level, $125 billion, 25% in addition to what we did in 22, which was already a record level. So the mobilization of the public side is really, really impressive. But in addition to that, what I find more interesting is that we had a record level of private financing associated with this financing of MDBs, so that we can absolutely know what it is. And it is doubling from the previous figures of 22. It's $100 billion. So it means that there is something that is really changing. And what we need to do is to develop big projects that are on technologies that are well known, but also early stage instruments that are going to help develop, actually not necessarily in emerging markets only, because climate change is global and there is no reason why a technology that will work in an advanced economy would not work in an emerging one. But we need both to make sure that we are reaching this. Now, which are the instruments we have? I mean, at EIB, we are a big bank. We lend every year 80 billion euros, mostly inside Europe. But the share that we do outside, which is between 10 and 15%, means between 8 and 10 billion euros. And we want ourselves to be transformed as the climate bank of the European Union. So most what we do is in climate. We have guarantees, and guarantees are very helpful, actually. One of the great examples that we are putting in place with the European Commission, with many DFIs that are actually here today, is called the Global Green Bond Initiative, to help the development of green bonds in emerging and developing countries, and especially in countries that have not done green bonds so far. Green bonds actually are mostly issued in euros, where when you look at the sovereign bonds in general, this is mostly in dollars. So this is really one of the things that we try to develop. It includes first loss pieces. I mean, this kind of instrument, we know how to do that. Huh? Blended finance. We have MCAF, for example, with Allianz, a German company, insurance company, well known, that is providing money for funds that are going to invest in projects that have a high innovative content in climate financing. We are supporting venture capital. This is also a way to help, especially for the startups, actually, and the early stage, as Mafalda said. Boost Africa is a good example of that, that we have done with the African Development Bank. And it is associated with something that I will finish with, which is capacity building. Very often you need to help those entrepreneurs, especially in poor countries, to put in place the elements for their strategy to be successful. We do that, for example, again with the German government in an initiative that is called Greening the Financial System, which is helping both public and private institutions in the financial sector to develop the green technologies, not technology, but the green regulations that are needed to be successful in their strategy on greening the economy.
Thank you. Rogelio, I know Dalus was instrumental in kind of helping shape and roll out Catalyst, which was a program that Mafalda talked about, and obviously the one that Gueye is working to develop. Can you talk about kind of how that factors into how you think about working with startups, scaling startups, and what those startups need to look like specifically within your ecosystem as they grow?
Of course. Thank you, Ingrid, for organizing this and taking the lead. And to the panelists, it's a pleasure to be here. So I come from the venture fund level. So we do face a lot of entrepreneurs and help them go through and navigate all the challenges they have, besides allocating equity or capital into their companies. And what we look for when we see the pipeline, and let me just announce that the pipeline in climate is increasing around 50% year over year. That means that there is a lot more awareness from the entrepreneurial ecosystem that this is a high priority that needs to be tackled, and more sophisticated entrepreneurs are coming in to develop these solutions that can scale. Now, to be able to scale, going to your question, is that we obviously see it from the demand side. We would like to understand what are the drivers for adoption, what's the economies of scale that technology needs to achieve to be able to be competitive. But not only that, we also, and by experience, because we have been investing in climate since 2011, we try to identify who are the incumbents and what are the types of reactions that we're going to get from them. And they are very strong because they're trying to defend their turf and the red ocean. So in our, obviously in our perspective, it's better not to compete, but to disrupt. And that's why early stage innovations are able to create new innovation adoption curves, where that innovation, if they get mass adoption, can end up replacing the previous innovation that is dominant in the market. And this is a much better way to enact change, because people that are already established, they control those markets, and they don't want to move. They're very, very well positioned. So the only way to move around them is just to expanding that market. We do it through a low-end market disruption and then a new market disruption play that can make some of these companies really big, because we find big markets where we can deploy these technologies. But obviously, evaluating these companies, it's also about the climate impact. We have been training ourselves, besides going into gender, like the 2X challenge. We're learning as we go on how to evaluate these climate startups. It's very different. We cannot see them as if we were looking at software companies, because the time horizon is different. The elements of support that they need are completely different from a technology or a software-based company. And obviously, well, the business model and unit economics in today's world are critical. If we don't go through them and analyze them in detail, it's not going to be sustainable in the long term. So that's kind of what we try to look at and identify to be able to scale those companies. I have more comments, but I'll wait for another question.
Well, I'd love to ask a follow-up question on that. You mentioned kind of the need to disrupt in order to move fast, and I think that makes a lot of sense. When you look at maybe hard to decarbonize industries like green steel or clean cement or sustainable aviation fuels, you do in some ways need the buy-in of incumbents. And so maybe a follow-up for you would be, what can incumbents do better in working with early stage startups to kind of help move faster? Or have you given up on this?
No, I'm an entrepreneur at heart, so I will always look for the bright side and how can we do it, el cómo sí, okay? Incumbents have a very difficult position because they have to defend the market. They're not always prepared, equipped to be able to disrupt themselves. And the cultures of these organizations, they might be committed to achieving some targets, but the culture holds them back. And I have seen companies, because I have helped many corporations in Mexico build their CVCs, the corporate venture capital arms, and they fight themselves within the other divisions of the organization to try to at least take a meeting with the entrepreneurs, or even take them and do a POC or a POV to test the technology. And in many cases, even if they hire them, they cannot pay them at 180 days that they pay all of their suppliers. They have to adjust. So there are different things that they need to be working on and be mindful of to be able to support this type of innovations and adopt them. Now, I've seen every type of response from incumbents, and you cannot imagine the things that I have lived through in these past 12, 13 years. But again, my perspective is that, because we have done it in different sectors, is that it's much, much better to invite them to the table, but under new rules. And it's much better to change those rules if you're building on a market that is not affecting their current business. And that is the perfect edge to build together. Or if they don't want to play along, well, see you at the end.
Please.
Can I say something about, because I mean, you touched on the decarbonization of industry, which is actually a really difficult one that also merits more attention. I mean, and you know, examples that you gave, green steel, green cement. So one of the things that is really important, and there are actually initiatives out there to drive this, is demand. How do we actually make sure that there's demand for that product, and aggregating demand such that there's actually some economies of scale. So that's quite important. The other important piece is governments. You know, what are the signals that governments are giving to the private sector and the market players in terms of, you know, these types of industries, the carbon intensity of these industries. But again, you know, I think here we are talking about large corporations. And by the way, this aggregation of demand or stimulating demand, what I have seen is that there's quite a bit of effort in developed markets. I think more needs to happen in terms of aggregating that demand and generating that demand in the offtake agreements is in emerging markets. Now, here, I mean, these are large corporations. And as Rogelio was saying, you know, they have the balance sheet to basically finance R&D. I mean, it's an internal decision. But, you know, again, it's another area where there needs to be work and further support. But what happens, and this is a little bit the topic of this discussion, is we might actually have smart, you know, startups, nimble, you know, companies that are looking at disruptive technologies even for these industries, which then may have been bought or acquired by these big ones, or grow by themselves. But you know, then the topic is, how do we support these ones as well, as we try to push the big corporations in the in going into green steel, green cement, and through various ways. How do we identify or support these early stage companies that are actually looking at what are the new solutions?
Please.
If I can, from my side, if you want to decarbonize industry, what you need is indeed this kind of big companies doing big investments supported by everybody, basically. And this is what we see in Africa. And the only point I would like to complement to what Mafalda said is this is a big opportunity also for those countries. Green hydrogen, for example, is probably the best way to decarbonize the hard-to-abate industry, be it fertilizers, cement, or steel. And what we see in the projects we are financing in a few African countries, or we are considering, like Namibia, in Egypt, in Mauritania, etc., is that this is a great opportunity for those countries, not only to develop green hydrogen because they have, provided they manage the water question, but also to develop their own industry. And at times when you see also carbon pricing mechanism being more efficient and increasing in many parts of the world, I think this is one of the elements that is absolutely essential for the decarbonization of the world. Now, that doesn't solve the question of the startups, but I think when you look at the broader picture, this is certainly one of the big pieces of the puzzle.
Absolutely.
Everybody became interested in your example. Can I add something?
Yes, absolutely. And I have a question for you after that around nature-based solutions.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. So about that also, like, so we are talking about new businesses, so they should bring new risks, right? Since that, we have also like to try to understand those risks and trying to develop those hybrid financial instruments and like blended finance and stuff, like how, and again, collaboration. Like, how can we do that together? How can we be open to mixed funds and VCs and stuff, like to try to help those organizations, those startups, those solution providers to reach and scale, and that's it. And also, like, you're going to ask me something about the nature-based solutions, but instead of that, I'm also adding another project that we are developing that is called Green Wave Insights. That it reunited a lot of different reports on climate innovation in Brazil. So we are mapping the whole ecosystem, understanding which are the solution providers, which are the solution seekers, and understanding which are the gaps, the size of this market, like to be able to take those to make those decisions more properly. So perhaps that's also a gap in this ecosystem. Like, we don't have the whole view of this ecosystem, and it's so difficult to try to figure out which are the options. Like, we are trying to think about so innovative solutions, like which are already the innovative solutions that are already happening already on the market. So maybe that's a gap.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Please, go ahead.
Let me add to that. Talent is very well dispersed around the world, and that's the premise that we need to take. These type of solutions that we're looking at or looking for are not going to be developed in Silicon Valley. I know that for a fact, because they're so focused on a segment where they are very good and special. And in today's world, 2 out of every $3 that are being invested are going into AI. They don't want to see anything else. That's the reality today. But the perspective of an emerging market puts you in a context of restrictions where you have to build from the ground up new solutions that can be relevant for the conditions of an emerging market. And these, in our experience, are not going to just be born out of nothing. You have to create an ecosystem that builds around them. When we decided to invest into climate back in 2011, we took an effort of first, and I have to say, every deal that I got on climate or climate innovation, I will always share it with the Green Climate Fund, with the private team. And the first response was, no, we do the big projects, no? I said, no, but this is important. And when I was invited to be in 2018 to their conference in Songdo, I said, we need to help create those ecosystems, and our perspective is that we need to work them at the city level in each of these important cities where you have critical mass of the players of an ecosystem. And you need the corporations, you need the government, you need the universities, you need the entrepreneurs, you need capital, and all these additional providers that help this ecosystem thrive. And to be able to do that at that level is first, and I can attest to this because we went through a program with MIT that is called the Regional Entrepreneurship Acceleration Program, that is a very good framework of how to enact change in an industry. And it's basically focuses on how do you create innovation capacity and entrepreneurship capacity at the city level with the participation of all the stakeholders talking the same language? Because that's one of the main, we have silos, and that's one of the main things that we need to be working on. So this building these capabilities help you basically develop initiatives that take good ground. And I'll give you an example. The first thing we did was, okay, let's create a for Latin America as a fund. And you might say, but that's not the role of the fund. I said, well, but we're social reformers as well. So we ended up creating a climate wiki so that we start to invite people to share knowledge and connect to each other and update that knowledge constantly. Then we created a community where we have close to 800 people very engaged throughout Latin America, where you have entrepreneurs, investors, FDIs, researchers. Everyone is there, and everyone is learning about the different incubation acceleration programs. And that type of engagement starts to create the elements of an ecosystem. After that, what we have been doing is every 6 months, we're mapping all of the startups that are out there. And when you showcase that map, if there's someone else that is not on the map, they will raise their hand. I want to be there. I want to be considered. And we know exactly, and we do them by sector, we know exactly how much are in the AgTech, in mobility, in circular, in each of the sectors. And by doing this, we convene them through a Climate Innovation Summit. We just had it 2 weeks ago in Mexico City. We had 400 people, and we showcased all of the first generation or the first cohort of the acceleration program of Catalyst. And we presented them to the entire ecosystem so that they can pitch to them. So those are the types of interactions that you need to have to build an ecosystem, because one of those ideas and innovations is going to pop up in Cartagena or in Mexico City or in Monterrey or in Rio or in Sao Paulo. And that's how you end up creating the funding continuum. With Catalyst, we're so happy that with our persistence as sponsors, I would say, and with the help of GIZ, we were able to get it through, and that's why Latin America is ahead of the program, of the curve. But the idea was to create 5 innovation hubs around the world. We have
I'd love to jump in, because we have a little bit of time left, and I want to squeeze in one more question, but I think that's what I love about this panel. I feel like it's easy to get trapped in what are the challenges, what are the barriers, and what's really exciting about the folks on this stage is we're working towards solutions, not just today, but over the past several years. So it's great to hear that.
I need to react to Rogelio. Rogelio, sorry, because in my language it's Rogelio, so I'm always like the default. And I mean, I only joined GCF a year ago, but probably because of you and many others that were putting some influence in the fund. Actually, last year we have this new strategy, and actually we have specific targets on ventures to actually support quite a significant number of these early stage companies. So that's great. So we need to keep exercising this pressure. And again, you know, this issue of the ecosystem, I think it's a really important one, and bringing multiple players together. So,
I will take the time of my last question that you will not ask to me to come back to what you said on another continent. We have launched, I'd say, the initiative that is called Boost Africa with the African Development Bank. And one of the reasons why it is not only interesting but successful is what you said. It includes a network, and a network of entrepreneurs that have launched their own venture, that have failed or that have been successful, and that can explain to those who are at the beginning of the process what worked,
We have quite a number of tools and we have a lot of flexibility. So that's one of the things to say. And we do very different things, as I was saying. We can help governments conduct assessments, technology assessments, which we are actually doing, so that they can also see, how they can come in and target their support to specific technologies or solutions. We can work at the regulatory level, which is the technopreneurship example that I was giving. We are working through venture funds. So we are supporting venture funds in some countries that in turn are supporting the early stage companies. We are supporting through equity funds. So again, we actually have, one of the largest climate equity portfolios in this multilateral, if not the largest in the multilateral space. And many good examples of these equity funds investing in small companies that are really trying to be disruptive and bring about new business solutions or new technologies. We are also, another way is actually to work with we help set up new financial institutions that can finance the ecosystem, the early stage companies, or work with existing ones, so greening greening financing facilities. So there's a broad spectrum in terms of what we can do. I do think that it is important to keep working with governments and the broader ecosystem so that they understand that we have these two big tasks, which is, yes, deploy commercially available technologies, and at the same time, think about the early stage technologies as well, and the fact that you need different things to support these two big, high-level goals, because these are opportunities for industrialization for them, to be ahead of the market, to drive employment. So we need, sometimes when we think about these things, we think, okay, let's just work directly with private sector and work, and find the companies and work with the companies. Oftentimes we might not think about the ecosystem, but thinking very closely about public-private, and what are those enablers?
It's a fantastic closing for the session. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you for being here. I don't think we have time for questions, unfortunately. Now I'll call up Ingrid-Gabriela Hoven, who is the Managing Director of GIZ, just to talk us through the next stage, moving into our open session around emerging markets, climate solutions.
So many thanks. So the room is full. This is exactly what we hope to have this morning on the second day of the Hamburg Sustainability Conference. And we are here in the Solutions Talk. And I think this morning, the moderator and our fabulous panelists have provided us with new insights. So I would really ask you to give it another big hand to our panelists. I think you have got from the presentations the urgency to take action. Our panelists have highlighted first that new technology has to be developed in order to get CO2 emissions down. 45%, this is a big number that Mafalda underlined. Rogelio underpinned a spatial dimension. That's the cities level. And we know from other evidence that more than 1/3 of CO2 reductions have to be provided by the municipal or local government level, by cities. And thirdly, we have highlighted an issue of generations. So if we want to get the big transformation really to be scaled up and speed up, we need to think about the younger generations. We need their buy-in. Unless we don't get it, it won't happen. So you have actually highlighted the sense of urgency that we have to act. And you have actually underlined how important it is to give more attention to a specific ecosystem. And these are the ones that really can move the needle into the right direction. And this is really, to drive climate innovation, we need these new and robust ecosystems that foster startups, scale up ventures, and build strong support frameworks in regions with high potential. And as has been highlighted, GIZ is implementing the Catalyst initiative that is being financed by GCF and the German Development Cooperation Ministry. And through Catalyst, we support early-stage climate ventures in Latin America and West Africa, the two hubs so far. And actually, throughout the first implementation phase, we have actually proven that these strategic interventions can accelerate innovation by providing equity-free seed funding, very important, additionally technical assistance, for instance, for elaborating business models and for doing matchmaking with possible investors, and actually the whole ecosystem built up, which is necessary so that startups can support each other, learn from each other, get inspiration from the overall ecosystem. But we think we have to get to the next stage. And therefore, here at the HSC, we would like to announce the launch of the new Forum on Climate Tech Investments. The forum will expand on the discussion initiated here, and it will be facilitated by the Catalyst initiative alongside the International Finance Corporation and many national partners. We hope to bring together key players, policymakers, development banks, venture capital investors, and entrepreneurs to discuss current barriers, identify effective solutions, and develop recommendations for follow-up action. How could these possibly strategic recommendations look like? For instance, policy recommendations such as faster approval of processes for climate technologies or green subsidies. We know that in many countries we still have a regulatory framework that is not necessarily incentivizing startups or new technologies or innovations because they are burdensome, they have high transaction costs that normally small business can't afford. So this is a big barrier. Secondly, financial instruments such as blended finance instrument or funds of funds. So you may say, well, blended finance, well done. I mean, we have done this for many, many decades. Yes, but is this whole system actually also directed vis-a-vis these type of businesses, small technology startups that are so crucial and necessary? That's the point. So we have a lot of experience sitting here with the European Investment Bank and many others. The GCF is doing blended finance as well. But can we do this in a way that is really incentivizing this specific ecosystem? And finally, technical assistance interventions such as how to effectively strengthen local ecosystem or coach VCs on measuring climate potential and build up new business models. So there's also a space where we could actually perhaps do even better with our support that we are providing so far. There will be 4 regional forums in the months to come until June 2025. Well, we hope that we can develop all 4 forums until the next HSC. And they're going to take place in Mexico, Colombia, Brazil, and in Senegal. And I would like to invite you all, and those that are part of your communities, to be part in this endeavor, part in this journey. I think we have to seize this opportunity and really shed more light to this very important ecosystem. We have learned a lot together in partnerships over the last couple of months, and now I think we have to scale up action. So let's do it. Thank you so much.